Has the General Assembly left schools then essentially in the lurch with not enough money to do this? That seems to be the claim.
Well, they haven't. They've been providing additional funds for class size reduction over the last few years. But their real question is, what happened to that money? And they're not really sure. We don't know a lot about what happens when the money goes from the state to the school districts because there's not a whole lot of transparency, fiscal transparency on the local level. So they asked districts last year, or earlier this year, where did this money go? And districts had a hard time telling them where the money went. And so this is really the essence of the problem, is that while the additional funds have been set aside for reducing class size, what legislators really worry about is that districts were using that money and the flexibility afforded to them by the state to pay for other things. And that includes sending that money to middle schools to pay for middle school expenses and high school expenses rather than focusing on K through 3.
I think everyone listening to us, Terry, can understand that parents are concerned about what happens to their kids in a classroom. That's terrific. We all want that. But it seems, based on your description of the flow of money, that the claim that some of these parents are making, and that apparently they're going to try to make to the legislature, is that the General Assembly didn't give them the money. But you're saying that really schools just use money differently.
That's exactly right. And they have flexibility to move money around. And this really plays into the problems with the way that we fund schools, which is something we've talked about in the past. But that is really the essence of the problem, is the money is being used in some way and not necessarily the way that the legislators would like it to be used.
So what seems to me to be a bit unfortunate is that, let's just play this scenario out. Let's say that these parents, they organize and they go to their legislators and they say, look, we have a problem with this. You've reduced class sizes, but you haven't given our school administrators the money that it will take to do this. If they're not on solid factual ground, that doesn't give them a lot of credibility to make their case to legislators. It seems like it's hurting them when they're trying to do the best for their kids.
Yeah, and what makes their approach even more vexing is the fact that they are using talking points and techniques that are being used by groups like the North Carolina Association of Educators, advocacy groups that aren't friendly to the General Assembly. So what you have is you have PTA chapters taking their cues from groups that really don't have much of a strong presence and certainly very little representation at the General Assembly, and pitting them on the side of those who oppose the reform agenda of the current sitting Republican legislature. And that's really what I find most troubling about this, is that had they just been parents who on their own saw this as an issue and paired with the superintendent or the principal to maybe voice some concerns, that's not a bad approach, and it's certainly not objectionable. But the fact that they are adopting the talking points and the techniques of those what we would consider to be left-leaning groups, that's really where the trouble starts, and that's really where I think that the PTA is misguided.